Hello, my name is Marijk Huysman. I'm an academic staff member of the Institute for Housing and Urban Development Studies at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. Today I would like to talk with you about pro-poor solid waste management, from the perspective of the poor as a service user and from the perspective of the poor as a service provider. We are living in a wasted society. We're generating loads of waste every day, every month, every year, not only in developed countries, also in cities of developing countries, the waste generations are on the rise due to economic prosperity and to higher consumption rates. Local governments in these cities face tremendous problems to cope with these ever-increasing quantities of solid waste and with the changing compositions of it. On the other hand, due to a lot of awareness on sustainable development, one also realizes that effective and efficient solid waste services are tremendously important as a public service. This has a number of reasons. Uncollected waste is a threat to the public health, and the spread of diseases and factors can affect the public health of an entire city and not only those areas that are unserviced. A second reason are the environmental conditions. Waste that is collected and not treated in a proper way often ends up at open dumping sites where it is threatening the conditions of water, soil, and air. Finally, the waste sector is an enormous source of income generation for not only public workers, but also for a lot of informal sector workers that recover, reuse, and recycle waste materials. If we look now at the position of the urban poor in many cities of developing countries and at their link with solid waste management, we unfortunately see that the needs of the poor in terms of access to waste collection services is often neglected. On the other hand, local governments also not recognize fully what the contributions are of the informal sector workers to the sustainability of the city. In certain cases, they are even being oppressed. In this session, I would like to have a closer look at the reasons why the poor are neglected for their urban services and for their contributions as informal sector workers. And on the other hand, I would like to have a look at a couple of case studies and see if we can take out some elements that would contribute to a pro-poor solid waste management approach. Now let's have a look why the poor don't have access to waste collection services. That's partly due to the fact that poor people often live in settlements that are highly congested and with roads and lanes that are not wide enough and unpaved to receive municipal waste collection trucks. On the other hand, policymakers and politicians also don't have a high priority to service people in low-income areas where no tax is being paid. Their slogan is no tax, no service. So with the lack of disposal facilities and partly also due to lack of awareness, poor people cannot do else than indiscriminately dump their garbage along the roadside, in the gutters, and on open spots in their living environments. Specifically, certain garbage creates extra problems. The thin polythene bags that are now forbidden in a lot of countries but are still being used are easily blown away and block drainage canals, which are then overflowing during monsoon seasons. So flood risks is increasing due to uncollected garbage. Also, the spread of diseases and factors increases when garbage is not collected. Uncollected garbage also has an impact on the overall aesthetics of the areas. People are therefore less encouraged to improve their living conditions. And finally, illnesses and environmental poor conditions also can have an impact on the productivity in the community and therefore deepening the circle of poverty even more. Now let's look at the poor as service providers. In many cities of developing countries, thousands of poor people depend on recyclables for their livelihood and their income. You will find pickers on the streets, very often women and street children. You will find pickers on dump sites, But you also find the urban poor in the workshops of buyers and wholesalers where they segregate the waste, and in the recycling factories. The sector attracts a lot of new migrants coming to the city in search for work, but also accommodates people from specific social and ethnic groups who have problems in getting access to more formalized types of work. The recycling network takes the form of a hierarchy. The higher the recyclables are traded, the more value is added to it. So the money is made at the top of the pyramid by the owners of recycling firms and the wholesalers. The lower you get at the pyramid, the lesser people earn. This is specifically the case for individual pickers who are not organized and who lack supportive networks. Due to the informality of the sector, there's hardly any control on working conditions and on environmental impacts of recycling activities. Therefore, there is a lot of occupational health risks among waste pickers. Finally, I would like to draw attention to the threats of privatization. The last decade, local governments have opted for commercial contracts with private commercial firms who are now very keen on getting exclusive access to recyclables at source. This is pushing out the waste pickers from their business. It's important to realize that many people are born, live, work, and even die among the garbage. It's an enormous challenge to see how best we can integrate the work of these people into existing formal solid waste management systems. During my work at IHS, I have the opportunity to collect case study material, exchange experiences with our participants, and also have the opportunity to visit interesting pilot projects. I would like to share some of my insights with regard to pro-poor solid waste management in this session with you. The issue in some of the Mumbai slums was that the lanes were reasonably kept clean, but then the uncollected waste was waiting in heaps on the crossings of the pavements or at the entrance of the slum. The local government decided to do something about it, and in collaboration with slum associations started a waste collection system. They first of all initiated a cleanup drive at the slum level in collaboration with the slum associations. After that, when people were made more aware and enthusiastic about cleaning up the area, one appointed young unemployed people to do the waste collection tasks. They are sweeping the lanes from 7 to 8 o'clock and they're cleaning the drains. At 8 o'clock in the morning, they are placing 50-liter containers at the crossings of the different pavements, and from 8 o'clock onwards, households can dispose of their waste in these containers. Between 10 and 11 in the morning, the containers are being removed by the youngsters and brought to the entrance of the slum, where they are loaded into municipal collection trucks. After that, the containers are cleaned and piled up for the next day. Every household pays a small amount, but altogether that is big enough to provide the waste collectors with a reasonable income. Now, this is an interesting example of a local government who took an initiative, who is providing the brooms and the bins, but also saves a lot of money in terms of collection and of sweeping costs. Another interesting example of a pro-poor waste service is the Green Exchange program in Curitiba, Brazil. Also here in the favelas where the poor live, are the roads too narrow to receive municipal collection trucks for the collection of waste. In line with their green development approach, the municipality of Curitiba decided to encourage the poor to segregate their waste and reward them for it. Over 30,000 households bring their segregated organic waste and their recyclables at certain days and at set timings to the entrance of the favelas, where collection trucks of the municipalities receive them. In return for this segregation, the poor receive healthy food, such as vegetables and fruits, but also free bus tickets. Now, what is the gain for the residents of these favelas? On the one hand side, they live in a cleaner environment. On the other hand, they have access to more healthy food, their mobility increased due to free public transport, and finally their awareness on environmental issues and on recycling has increased. What is the gain of the municipality? The municipality saves cost in terms of sweeping and collection. The recycling efficiency went up, and this also generates new job opportunities in the recycling sector. And finally, the revenue of the recyclables that are sold by the municipality are utilized for social development programs in the city. I now want to give some examples of how the informal sector, and specifically the most vulnerable within this sector, can be supported. The next example derives from Quezon City in the Philippines, where over 2,000 dump pickers were supported and where their working and living conditions were improved. It was there where the local government decided to convert the open dumping site, Payatas, where all these dump pickers were working, into a controlled disposal facility. And instead of displacing the waste pickers, they, together with the help of some dedicated NGOs, transferred the individual waste pickers into 13 associations. Every association has been assigned a sub-area at the dump site where they can pick and segregate waste that is brought in by the municipal collection trucks, but during particular timings of the day and for a particular duration. This has avoided lots of fights that were already occurring on the dump sites before between individual pickers. Next to the fact that they have improved the working conditions on the dump site, the NGO also made an effort to transfer the families that were living on and next to the Payatas dump site to social housing units and provided them with access to health and education services. There are also alternative sources of income at this moment. For example, women of these households are providing ironing services and using electricity generated from biogas at the dump site. Other interesting income-generating sources are the production and manufacturing of products from recyclable waste. Now, this is an extremely interesting example of a local government making an effort to integrate the informal sector instead of pushing them out of their business. The second example, related to the organization and empowerment of waste pickers, derives from Latin America, where local waste picker groups have transformed themselves into micro and small enterprises and into unions of recicladores, as they call themselves, recyclers. What started as a small initiative in countries like Brazil and Colombia has grown into a worldwide movement, the Global Alliance of Waste Pickers, representing 28 countries in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Representatives of the Global Alliance are now attending international conferences related to climate change and sustainable development and are lobbying for recognition of their work. Their latest lobby involves a protest against the adoption of incineration plants in cities of developing countries where waste is generated into energy. This kind of incinerators will push them out of work. They have calculated that for every 7 tons of recyclables that are not incinerated, 1 permanent job can be created. When we look at the local level, these micro and small enterprises are now in a competitive way tendering with commercial private firms for waste collection and cleaning services. They are technically and business administratively and managerially trained by NGOs and supported by committed local governments. The last set of examples dealing with waste pickers and the informal sector is focusing on citywide integration approaches and brings us to the city of Pune in India. I was lucky enough to be there recently. We were going there with a group of 18 municipal government officers from Nepal to have a look at this perfectly organized system. It is here where thousands of female waste pickers demanded a right and first and rightful access to recyclables. They were threatened by the fact that the municipality opted for commercial privatization And therefore they saw that they were being pushed out of their livelihoods and income-generating activities. They erected or established a cooperative called Swatch in 2007, and by going on the street and by demanding the right to recyclables, the government sat with them around the table and established a system that has fully integrated now the informal sector workers into the formal waste collection system. It involves 2,300 members of the Swatch cooperative, of which 75% are women. They work in teams of 2 to 3, and they service over 400,000 households in the city of Pune. They go from door to door and collect wet and dry waste, as far as people are segregating, because I think 40% of the households are now segregating their waste. It's interesting to see that where possible, the teams are also composting organic waste in suitable housing compounds. After the waste is being collected, they bring it to segregation sheds at the neighborhood level, at the neighborhood level, where the waste is further segregated and sorted and stored before it's being sold to buyers or wholesalers. The municipality invests in the equipment and in the sheds at the neighborhood level. It partly pays for the management costs, and it also pays for awareness campaigns to make the local households and encourage local households to segregate their waste. On the other hand, the municipality is gaining a lot. They are saving per year over 12 crore rupees, which is equivalent to $1.9 million per year, because of this model, because of this system. The teams or the waste collectors are paid a fee by the households where they collect the waste, and they have additional income because of the sale of the recyclables. So here again, we see a win-win situation for both. Another citywide approach is being practiced in the city of Porto Alegre in Brazil, where informal waste pickers are also now for years being integrated in not only the waste collection system, but also in the waste segregation system that takes place in a number of material recovery facilities that have been built at the edge of the city. It is here where they segregate the waste, shred the waste, clean the waste, and pack it before it is being collected by recycling enterprises. They receive a salary from the municipality, and they get additional income due to the sale of the recyclables. They work on a cooperative basis. It is interesting to see that also here the municipality opted not for displacements of the informal sector, but for integration into the already existing formal waste collection and segregation system. Now, if we look further, we see interesting other examples also by, for example, UNESCAP in Bangkok, who started a couple of years ago the so-called Integrated Resource Recovery Centers. The first one was established in the city of Matale in Sri Lanka. It is specifically meant for secondary towns because they start on a small scale, and they can compose around 3 to 5 tons of organic waste on a daily basis. The interesting aspect is that also here the existing informal sector workers are integrated in the waste collection and segregation system, but also in the composting process. And the aim is, in the end, to have the composting plants handed over to cooperatives of informal sector workers. So it's interesting to see that during the last decade, more and more of these examples are coming up. Now let's summarize what we learned from these examples. What are the pro-poor elements when it comes to access to waste services for the poor? First of all, it's very important to know the community, to know the type of waste that is being generated, and to know what the waste handling practices are. It's also important to scale down, to come to the community and even to the lane level, where people can be mobilized and can be made enthusiastic for these kind of collection systems. It's a continuous process of informing, consulting, and mobilization. It's a step-by-step approach. What we also saw is that it's very important to create a win-win situation. Municipalities alone are not able to invest. One could expect from the community to invest themselves, and that is very often the case. Also in low-income areas, people are prepared to pay a fee when the area is kept clean. One should make use of affordable, easy to handle and maintain equipment and technology. And what is equally important is to ensure that there is a proper link between the primary and the secondary collection system. And finally, it's very important to develop an organizational and a payment structure to ensure that the program is sustainable in the long run. So what are the poor elements when it comes to integration of the informal sector? First and foremost, support and improve what is already there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Political commitment is very important. Supportive policies and legislations that recognize the position of the informal sector are also important, as well as municipal systems that create space for recovery and recycling, and for the services of micro-enterprises and cooperatives. This also requires a redefinition of privatization. Not only space for commercial and bigger firms that are interested in economic interest, but also for the more social-oriented organizations. In addition, we also need social mobilization strategies and approaches to positively influence the public and the political opinion. And finally, we need actions and programs that improve the living conditions of the waste workers and their families. We have come to the end of this session, and I would like, in conclusion, one more time state why pro-poor solid waste management is so important. It's not only important for the improvement of the living and working conditions of the poor, but it also leads to better services for lower prices, for higher levels of sustainability at the city level, and finally, for a better quality of life for all citizens. Thank you very much.